Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers, and welcome back to another episode of Her Thoughts, a show discussing many topics through the lens of women, as well as reading and answering your emails and questions. Firstly, I would like to start off by sending my condolences to you all on the death of Khadija alayhi salam, wife of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, and mother of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. But Khadija alayhi salam in her own right had a great status of her own. Khadija alayhi salam was the very first woman to believe in Allah as the one true God and Muhammad as the messenger of Allah. A great honor and status to be the first believer in Islam. Truly, Khadija alayhi salam perfected every aspect of her life, from marriage to motherhood to her faith, and surely her hard work in the home and most importantly outside in the greater society. Her whole life was a sacrifice to Islam. Truly, if it wasn't for Khadija's wealth and support, Islam would have never spread as it did. So, today we shall be taking a closer look at Khadija's life. Who is she? How did her participation and sacrifice change the course of history? And more importantly, what can we, living in the 21st century, learn from her? All that and much more in today's episode, so let's jump right in. I'm your host, Zahra Al-Alawi, and today with me is my co-host, Sister Zahira, Sister Fatima, and Sister Sayedah Khadija. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
So today we are commemorating the death of Khadija alayhi salam, a great lady. So let's start off by establishing who is she?
I think it's very important to understand Bibi Khadija even before she accepted Islam. Bibi Khadija as a lady, she was very well known at that time. So she was a successful businesswoman in her own right. She was known to uphold her integrity. So, and this is how the path of Bibi Khadija and our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, this is how their paths crossed, because she got to know what type of a person he was when he helped in her caravan in the trade. So she was very well known in the community at that time as an integral part of the community. She was, she used to trade goods between Makkah, Syria, Yemen, etc. And so her as a figure in Islam, really her personality and her characteristics even started before she accepted Islam. And we have to remember that she got many proposals, but she turned them down. And she was the one who proposed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Yeah. So she was strong in her own rights. She wasn't ashamed of proposing. She was senior to our beloved Prophet. And she was a very crucial figure in Islamic history pre-Islam. And she was when she traded, her goods were known to be the quality was good, the price was fair. So her personality was known even before she accepted Islam from Prophet Muhammad.
I think something that's really amazing about Sayedah Khadija is the fact that at the time where she, her generation, women were buried alive.
Yes.
And she still managed to be who she was. She still managed to hold that stance, which now, we've got a lot more freedom, but we feel restricted.
Yes.
She didn't let that get in the way. Even though men looked down upon her, treated her badly, she still, knew her stance. She was strong. She did her business, like you said. She proposed to the Prophet of Islam, which is a big deal. If we were to look at it now in our generation, with cultural issues and many different things, although religion does allow it, the culture will be like, no, how can a woman do something like this? Which is amazing. Like she shows us what a woman should really be, or what a woman can be. It's pretty nice.
Absolutely. And just to add to Fatima's point, Sayedah Khadija alayhi salam, she pretty much broke through every stereotype that we have in our generation, 1400 years plus ago. And it's just amazing, you say that she's an example and she's what we should aspire to be, and we're saying this in 2021, which just goes to show we've regressed as a community, as a human race, we've regressed, and as women we have such a long distance to go until we can get to an acceptable level.
That's the thing. I think many of those restrictions on women back then were cultural. And when Prophet Muhammad came with his message, he kind of remove these cultural aspects which were oppressing women. But I think in this day and age, women are still oppressed culturally underneath the umbrella of religion, and many of these restrictions are placed on women under the umbrella of religion when it's not religion. And when we look at the life of Sayedah Khadija alayhi salam, we see that in a male dominated society, she was so successful, she was so active, she was so out there. The community knew her, they knew her as Amirat Quraysh, they knew her by many other titles. She was so active within society. But now, if a woman does that, it's seen as, you know, a woman should be hidden. Like hijab is a form of being hidden, when hijab is not that. Hijab is to protect you while allowing you to go out and participate in society.
Absolutely, and not just in the Muslim community, even if we look at wider society, a secular society, while we think, or women think that, you know, we've progressed and, you know, we're allowed to do this and we're allowed to do that, there are so many examples even today of how in a secular society women are still not equal to men. There's, you know, the most obvious thing is the gender pay gap. There is, you know, I don't want to go into specific examples, but if you just watch a few TV shows, there is so much misogyny. The language that's used about women, it's vulgar, it's disrespectful. And again, like I said before, we're saying this in 2021, which means, unfortunately, we still haven't made the progress that we needed to.
In Britain, I think it was in the 90s with the suffragettes.
Yep.
It took quite long for them to be able to, you know, vote, to stand up and say, we have an actual role. Whereas our religion, in Islam, women were already doing that. Like Sayedah Khadija alayhi salam, Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, they were already showing us examples of this.
It's quite ironic when people then say that Muslim women, especially Shia women, are oppressed, where we have Sayedah Khadija, who was the first role model for us. She is the mother of Bibi Fatima. She's a lady of Jannah. She is a successful businesswoman. She upheld her house. She helped Prophet Muhammad spread the religion of Islam, and she is very key. We know that, you know, in the early years of Islam spreading, you have Bibi Khadija, you have and Hazrat Abu Talib, and Imam Ali's courageous, and the fact that Imam Ali and Prophet Muhammad were like brothers. But Bibi Khadija was very key in spreading the religion of Islam. She gave away her wealth for Islam. She was so nurturing to the orphans, to the widows at that time. And it's very, like you said, it's so ironic where we as women in the, you know, the century that we live in now, we are often oppressed. We are seen as oppressed women, where if you just have to open up the history books and look at Sayedah Khadija, one of the first females in Islam who accepted Islam, and the Lady of Jannah, the mother of Zahra, there is no oppression when it comes to her.
Yeah, beautiful. Let's look at her life and see what she contributed towards Islam, because we know that if it wasn't for Khadija alayhi salam, Islam wouldn't have spread as it did. She contributed so much to the religion. So let's talk about what she contributed towards Islam. How did her support or her participation help Islam spread?
Two things. Sorry, Fatima, go ahead. Two things that come to mind is we know famously that she dedicated all of her wealth to the spread of Islam, and when the first Muslims who joined Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when they were sanctioned and they were living in the valley of Abu Talib, it was her wealth that kind of got them through that very, very tough period. But the other thing that's equally as important is her support towards not her husband, but the prophet of her time, and potentially you could say the imam of her time. And, you know, behind every successful man, we always say is a woman. This is a key example of that.
I think also, you know, we know that when Prophet Muhammad and Bibi Khadija were married, that there was no other. Prophet Muhammad was only married to Bibi Khadija, which shows that their relationship, it was so perfect, similar to how we talk about Imam Ali and Bibi Fatima Zahra. She was there not only for her wealth, but for her emotional support for Prophet Muhammad. And we know that in the early years of when Islam was being spread, our beloved Prophet went through a lot. We've heard stories of, you know, people throwing stones and rocks and dirt and even, you know, as feces upon our beloved Prophet, and how Bibi Khadija was always there as his rock to support him. And when she passed away, and Bibi Khadija and Hazrat Abu Talib passed away in the same year, and that was a year of grief, and our beloved Prophet really felt that, because those were the two key figures in his life in the early years of Islam spreading, which helped him to spread the Islam. So had it not been for Bibi Khadija's support as for the wealth, but support as who she was, you know, our beloved Prophet, maybe he may have found it harder without her. So it just shows how important the female role model is for all of us.
Yeah, I think what else, another point that's really amazing about her, touching upon what you said, she gave all her wealth, and she was quite wealthy before, but once she gave all her wealth and everything was gone, she still stood by the Prophet. I remember reading a story where the Prophet, from the hunger that they had, they would put rocks on their stomach so they wouldn't get hungry, and she was with him. She stuck beside him, and she was even, you know, she didn't have money for a coffin when she passed away. So she really was like a strong person, a strong individual. A very big inspiration
from
for us.
someone like the point you mentioned, from someone who had so much wealth, was so successful, had so much wealth, to at the end of her life when she passed away didn't even have enough money to get a shroud to cover her own body. It shows how much she sacrificed for the religion. Like many of us will say that we're dedicated to the religion, we're dedicated to spreading the religion, we may give some wealth towards the religion, but no one will give all their wealth where it leaves them and their kids and their children and their household with nothing at all. And she was that dedicated that she gave all her wealth. And another very beautiful point is that I think is the support she gave Prophet Muhammad. And I think that is absolutely beautiful, because even Prophet Muhammad said himself that when he came home and anytime he felt distressed, he will look at Khadija and he found comfort in her. And I think if a husband says that about his wife, or even a wife says that about her husband, that is so beautiful. And that's the thing, we are clothing, we are a garment or a cloth for our spouse, for one another, and that's what we should be. We should support each other. And many spouses come home sometimes exhausted or going through so much, but then they find sometimes, let's say, discomfort, or they find anger at home rather than finding comfort. And I think that is a beautiful quality that we should learn from Khadija. And we see the same with Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, being a comfort for Imam Ali in times of distress, and I think that's beautiful.
You know, it also shows, going back to the wealth part, that money is just materialism, and we don't actually need it. I mean, you need it to survive, but for Bibi Khadija, going from where she was to her end days where she was, you know, just eating leaves to survive and the rocks on the stomach to control the pangs of hunger, for her, money was nothing for her, because she knew that Prophet Muhammad, follow Prophet Muhammad, that is the truth, that is the success to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a very important point for us in our daily lives, where we shouldn't be engulfed by materialism and by money and by the success of this life and the luxuries of this life, and know that your ultimate goal and your ultimate success is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is one of a very important lesson that we learn from Bibi Khadija herself.
It's like the slightest inconvenience. And we are asking God why. I guess we all do it a lot.
We question.
It's like, oh my God, I'm struggling. Why does it have to be like
why
this?
me?
But she didn't say the why, which is amazing.
That's beautiful. Now, we've said many examples that we can take from Lady Khadija alayhi salam, but especially living in the 21st century, what can females, because many times females feel a disconnect with the figures of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, because they lived so many years ago. But as we said in previous episode, that you know, the Ahlul Bayt and the message of Islam is relevant in all generations. So what can females living in the 21st century learn from Sayedah Khadija alayhi salam? What can we kind of really implement into our own lives?
I think it goes back to her beautiful qualities of, she was a a woman with many qualities. So she not only had a business, she was the mother, she was a lady of Jannah, and she's a mother of a lady of Jannah as well. She was a perfect wife. And so there are so many qualities that you can take from her that you can then instill into our daily lives. For example, sometimes we have this constant battle where can you still be a good mother, but can you still work, and can you still continue in the house and do whatever you need to do? But we've got, for example, Bibi Khadija, who could uphold all of this while still supporting her husband, while still spreading the message of Islam with her husband. So I think as women, she should be our first role model.
Yeah.
And as women, we should look up to her and say that if Bibi Khadija can do it, why can't we do it? Especially in this generation, and especially in this day and age where women are often, it's looked upon as a taboo if woman is very outspoken, or if women go to work, or if women want to do things to try and spread the message of Islam. You know, you often, people look down upon you. Why is she doing that? Why is she speaking out? Or why is she speaking out on TV? Where we have Bibi Khadija, who never gave up her, she maintained her hijab, she maintained her poise, but still stood up with Prophet Muhammad and spread the message of Islam whilst giving all her wealth and whilst looking after the orphans and the widows. And she was very, and this is how we see the rest of our imams now. The rest of our imams are very nurturing, very caring, always looking after the orphans, where you have Bibi Khadija, who has initially started it off.
Yeah,
I think, sorry, you're asking, you know, what can we take away as women in this generation from Sayedah Khadija? I think two things are really important. Number one, the level of her social activism is huge. Like, the fact that her reputation preceded her, people knew her name, is a really big deal. And I'm not saying this to kind of, you know, from a viewpoint of fame or vanity or anything like that. She was well known because of the influence she had in the society that she lived in. She played a big role in taking girls who were going to be buried. She would be the ones to take them and look after them and say, okay, don't bury them, I will look after them, I will provide financial aid. Her business, again, and she came from a monotheistic family. She was a monotheist even before she accepted Islam, which in that era, it shows a level of independent thinking and intellect. So she had all these qualities, but like I said, the thing that sticks out to me the most, and I say this because, again, in a lot of our communities, it's very taboo if a woman speaks out, particularly about the community. If there's an issue and a woman speaks out, you know, I don't want to ruffle feathers, but sometimes we practice some degree of hypocrisy when we're praising Sayedah Khadija for being this beacon in her society, where in our local communities it's, you know, it's offensive if a woman has a bone to pick. So her social activism is massive, and it's something that we can all take away from. But secondly, I think it's really important to also, I know our viewership is probably mostly female, but it's so important to talk about Sayedah Khadija, Fatima Zahra, Sayedah Zainab, all these women, and teach the males in our community about them as well, because I think part of the problem lies in males not really understanding the degree of freedom that these women had and the degree of freedom that Islam provides us. Often I feel that, and correct me if I'm wrong, could be completely wrong, but my perception is that often in our communities, we as women, we hear about all the imams, we hear about the Prophet, and it's fine. But when it comes to women, that's just directed towards women, and then the men never get to hear about how these women functioned, what was their day-to-day, what kind of freedom did they enjoy, what kind of activism did they have. And I feel like if males in our society, not just in our community, but just males in general, even in the secular community, actually knew what these women were like, then this whole notion of women are oppressed in Islam would just be banished.
One thing that's said a lot is be a Fatima to Ali.
Yep.
Be a Fatima to your husband, like Fatima was to Ali or something like that. But they never say the opposite way.
Yeah.
Be a Ali to your, you know. That's something that's always said. I feel like you're right. Men should know a lot more about these female figures, because they're not just role models for us, but they're role models for them too. They need to know how to treat their daughters, their wives, their mothers, their sisters, the amount of independence that they should give them, and how much they should let them speak out to the world.
Definitely, yeah. So let's move on to the aspect of marriage, because I feel like there's a lot of lessons to learn from the marriage of Sayedah Khadija alayhi salam and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And I think especially in this day and age when divorce rates are rising, many youth are not getting married. They're getting married much older because there's obstacles put in the way in what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. What can we learn from the marriage of Sayedah Khadija alayhi salam and Prophet Muhammad, especially in this day and age?
I think one of the things that sticks out about Sayedah Khadija alayhi salam is she knows how to prioritize. You know, she had her business, she had her social activities, all of that. But as soon as she accepted the message of Islam, that became her priority, and that stuck right until the end. And you know, the fact that, like we've mentioned a couple of times now, she didn't have enough money to buy herself a shroud is testament to just how high a priority this was in her life. And I think going into any marriage, it's important to be aligned on your priorities with your partner. And sometimes this is the problem. Like, I think, you know, I have very little experience, but I feel like sometimes we want to have our cake and eat it too. So this is my priority until it hits this point where it's a little bit too much for me, so I'm going to take a step back, and possibly that's where there are disconnects.
I think also, you know, often in society and community, men may feel inferior to the woman if they find that the woman is more successful to them, or if the woman is older than them. There's this often, you know, the man has to be the older, and the man has to be the one who's done the proposal, and the man has to be the one who's more successful earning the money. Whereas with Bibi Khadija and Prophet Muhammad's relationship, it's completely opposite.
Exactly.
She was his senior. She sent the proposal, and she was the more successful one. And you can see how she saw the characteristics of Prophet Muhammad, and she sent the proposal to him. There is no place in community now, I think, where we've got the example of Bibi Khadija and Prophet Muhammad to ever feel that a woman cannot be successful in her own right, or a woman cannot be older than her husband, where Islam just shows that age is not a barrier.
Yeah.
And like going back to what you said, Zahira, her priorities were straight. Yes, she was successful, but she knew that her wealth was not going to get her to the end goal. And often I think that we get trapped in this cycle of career and money and success, and career and money and success, and living for this world and not planning for your akhirah, where she had it the way it should have been.
Yeah.
And she did it from the get-go. And she knew that Prophet Muhammad was the truth. Her whole life was dedicated to him.
That's beautiful, yeah. Yeah. I think another obstacle that I think people place, and which we can learn from the marriage of Sayedah Khadija and Prophet Muhammad, is the aspect of a man has to have all the job and the car and the house and everything materialistically, or shall we say, have the money and the wealth. Whereas when you look at the marriage of Sayedah Khadija alayhi salam and Prophet Muhammad, she was the wealthy one, and more wealthy than the man. And I think that is creating a lot of problems in society, because I don't think that sometimes, and that is what's stopping a lot of people getting married younger, because who at a young age will have a car and a house and the money? And I think it's not about having the money, it's about seeing potential. And Khadija alayhi salam saw potential in Prophet Muhammad, because obviously, even this is before his prophethood, but she knew of his character, she knew of his in his dedication, of who he was. And I think, in a sense, I'm not saying go and marry someone that has no ambitions and no potential, but you marry someone that has a good characteristic, that has potential, has dedication, but may not have the wealth now. And Prophet Muhammad became the most successful person to ever have lived on this earth, and that was before, and she married him before his prophethood. So it just shows us that all these obstacles that we put in the way now, they don't really mean that you'll have a successful marriage, and it's really delaying marriage for the youth.
Absolutely. And I know we've touched on social media, like possibly in every single episode that we've done this season, but I think it plays a massive role. I think one of the problems is that we only see the glam on social media, so automatically I think someone else's marriage looks like this car and this house and this many holidays a year, and if you know, if a suitor comes and he doesn't seem to have that, then it's not a marriage, or it's not the type of marriage that I want. And like I said, there's so much comparison. We only see a small window into anyone else's life anyway. But I think social media has a big role to play in this kind of deceptive appearance that marriage should be.
Yeah, and often I don't know whether it's just me feeling this, but do you not find that sometimes, for example, if a girl is very highly educated, she may not get enough proposals, or a boy may feel a bit intimidated, or often it's also the family who are sending the proposal, no, she's too highly educated, we can't go for her, she may just want to work afterwards, or she's more high educated than my son.
Or even the girl's family as
well.
Yeah. They'd be like, the boy needs to be at the same level as model, or they has to be the same field as she's studying. Yeah.
Well, we've got the perfect match, which is completely opposite.
Yeah.
So
we talk about this, about the age difference, and even, you know, let's say in terms of work status. So all these cultural stigmas that are present, how can we kind of break them? Because it's not haram to get married to someone that is, say, for a man to get married to a woman that's older, but then it's still looked down upon in terms of, you know, a man being less successful than a woman, let's say, in terms of work and, I'm not going to say wealth-wise, or being less wealthy. So all these cultural stigmas that are present in society, how do we sort of break them?
I think they are slowly, now you are breaking them slowly, but I think educating is the most important thing. And, you know, shows like this, or, you know, other shows or other, you know, lectures where we are educating not just the youth, but maybe the older generation in our community as well, that there is no place in our community for this, because Islam was not based on this. Religion is not based on this. And so, and it has to be done in a very sensitive manner as well, because often it's the older generation where it's more kind of set that this is how it needs to be, and marriage needs to be like this, and the man needs to send the proposal, and the man needs to be the older person, and the man needs to be the one who's a breadwinner of the family. So it's slowly breaking that, you know, the taboos that we have in our community, breaking past those stereotypes, educating slowly, but doing it in a very sensitive manner, because, you know, the older generation, they are our parents. And we would not be here without them today at all. So we have 100% respect for them. But it's just educating slowly, but also the youth of the community as well, that don't feel that you have to be of a certain status before you send that proposal. And I think it's often that's where maybe marriages are getting delayed as well. Like you said, Zahra, people feel that they have to be of a certain status before they send that proposal, or before you accept that proposal. Let me finish this before I say yes.
I think it's a two-pronged attack. I think, like Sayedah said, there is a generational disconnect where perhaps things are set and have to be a certain way for the older generation. So that can be addressed, I think, in probably ways that they are used to, for example, through, you know, the usual events that they would attend, maybe addressing these as topics and lectures. But I think the other part of the problem is actually getting the youth to prioritise correctly. And in the advent of social media, peer pressure, and an increasingly secular society, it becomes very difficult amongst all that to then come out and say, actually, this is my priority. I just want someone who, you know, is a lover of the Ahlul Bayt, who practices Islam, and their priority is this. They've just got so many battles that they're fighting against, you know, image insecurities, hijab being questioned, just a lot of comparison and a lot of desire for materialistic things. And I think we need to provide an alternative and kind of make them see what the true priority is, and that these things are very, very short term. And it's easy for me to say, like it rolls off the tongue to say, you know, these things aren't important. But how do you drive home a point like that to, for example, someone in their late teens who possibly is in university or sixth form, and this is what they're surrounded by, these constant insecurities, constant comparisons, and windows into a secular life.
I feel like the older generation have a big influence as well.
Yes.
So some people might not have those materialistic ideas, like you said. A lot of the youth do. But a lot of the time I feel like parents have also set certain standards, not just parents, like you'd find grandparents, you know, they've set a certain standard where even if the girl would be like, I just want him to be religious or good, they will be like, yeah, okay, but he needs to study this, he needs to have this, he needs to have that, which is understandable. Because they've all experienced something and they don't want their daughters or their sons to experience the same thing. But that's also one kind of barrier, I guess.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. We are approaching the end of the show, so any last words that you want to leave with the viewers on the anniversary of Sayedah Khadija's death? Any last words you would like to leave with the viewers?
I'd say to all the young girls out there, all our viewers, that use Sayedah Khadija as a role model for yourself rather than the people on social medias, because she is a figure that is very inspiring. Learn about her, try to understand who she really was and be more like her, because once you look into her personality you realize that so many doors are open for you and you've got so many more opportunities, and it will definitely help you within the 21st century.
I think if we actually study her and we look at her qualities, there's no room for any other role models. We wouldn't, our youth wouldn't have to turn to social media. They've got the role models in front of them.
100%.
Lastly, I would just add, if you have any brothers, any sons, any fathers, make them study the life of Sayedah Khadija, because this is a two-way street. The effort needs to be both ways.
Yes.
Definitely, yeah. I do believe that, Khadija alayhi salam, as we mentioned throughout the show, that she has perfected every aspect of her life. And I think especially in this day and age where people are constantly trying to emulate people that they see within society, and no matter who we look at, they may have good qualities, but they also have bad qualities. There's no perfect kind of holistic woman. And when we look at Khadija alayhi salam, that's who she is. So we have come to the end of the show. Thank you so much for all the different points and different aspects that you mentioned throughout the show. And thank you for the dear viewers for tuning in today's episode. And once again, we send our condolences to you all on the death of Sayedah Khadija alayhi salam. And inshallah, we all could take aspects of her life and try to emulate the great characteristics and a great woman that she was. Inshallah, join us again in the next episode. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.